The girl who found the sun again. For most of her life, Emily Carter had been the kind of girl who made others believe that happiness was permanent. She lived in a quiet town in Oregon where the air smelled like pine and the sky turned pink every evening. Her world was simple: a small bookstore she ran with her father, a golden retriever named Daisy, and a fiancé who promised her forever. Her days passed with laughter, coffee cups, and the kind of peace that people spend their whole lives chasing. Emily thought her story would always stay that way, calm, beautiful, and safe. But life, as she would learn, never makes promises it can keep. It began one rainy morning in November. The sky was heavy, the streets soaked, and the air cold enough to turn breath into fog. Emily woke up to a phone call that shattered her world. Her father's voice was gone, replaced by the silence of death. A heart attack, they said, quick and cruel. She stood in her kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, and the world around her blurred. The sound of the rain outside became distant, her heartbeat loud and uneven. She wanted to scream, but no sound came out. In 1 second, her life had split in two, before and after that call. The bookstore, once full of laughter and the soft hum of jazz music, now felt like a museum of memories. Every shelf, every old book carried her father's scent, a mix of paper and aftershave. She tried to keep it open, but customers stopped coming, and soon the bills began to pile up. Her fiancé, Mark, tried to comfort her at first. He told her they'd get through it together. But grief changes people, and not everyone can love you through your worst days. Slowly, Mark began to disappear too, first emotionally, then physically. One evening he came home late, eyes tired, voice distant. He sat across from her and said words that would haunt her for months. "I can't do this anymore." Then he left. The ring stayed on the table for days. Sometimes Emily picked it up and stared at it, trying to understand how something that once meant forever could now mean nothing. Nights turned longer, mornings colder. She stopped opening the curtains. She stopped answering calls. Her world became a small circle of grief, a couch, a blanket, a window she never looked out of. Daisy, her dog, was the only thing that kept her from falling apart completely. Every morning, Daisy nudged her hand with her nose, as if reminding her that the world still needed her, even if she didn't believe it. Winter passed slowly. Snow covered the town, and silence filled every corner. One afternoon, Emily decided to walk to the lake near her house, something she hadn't done since her father died. The lake was half frozen, the air sharp against her skin. She sat on a wooden bench and finally cried, really cried for the first time in months. It wasn't quiet or graceful, it was loud, broken, and real. When she finally stopped, she looked up and saw an old woman standing near the edge of the lake, feeding birds. The woman smiled gently and said, "You look like someone who's trying to remember how to breathe." Emily didn't know how to respond, but somehow those words stayed in her heart. The woman's name was Martha, a retired teacher who lived nearby. They began to meet often by the lake. Sometimes they talked about books, sometimes about nothing at all. Martha had wrinkles that deepened when she laughed, and eyes that had seen both joy and sorrow. "Pain," she once told Emily, "isn't the end of your story. It's the middle, the part that hurts the most before things make sense again." Those words planted something inside Emily. Not hope, not yet, but the memory of what hope felt like. Slowly, she started changing little things. She began to take longer walks with Daisy. She reopened the bookstore for a few hours each day. She started writing letters to her father in a notebook, letters filled with the things she never got to say. Each word felt like a step forward, like learning to live again. One spring morning, a young man walked into the bookstore. He was a traveler, a photographer passing through town, looking for old books and stories to capture. His name was Ryan. He asked Emily if she believed places could hold memories, and she said yes. every corner of her store did. They talked for hours about books, photography, and the way loss shapes people. When he left, he promised to bring her a photo of the lake at sunrise. The next morning, he did. It was beautiful, golden light over frozen water, like the world was beginning again. Ryan stayed in town longer than he planned. They became friends, then something more. Not in a sudden, fiery way, but in the quiet rhythm of shared mornings and unspoken understanding. He never tried to fix her pain, he simply stayed, and that made all the difference. One evening, as the sun set outside the bookstore window, Emily looked at him and realized something she never thought she would again. She was happy. Not the old kind of happiness, the easy one she once knew, but a deeper kind, born from everything she had survived. Years passed. The bookstore thrived again. Tourists came for the books and stayed for the warmth. Emily filled the shelves with stories of resilience and love. She framed Ryan's photo of the lake and hung it near the entrance with a small note beneath it. Even the coldest winter ends. Sometimes, when she saw customers smile, she thought of her father, of Martha, of everything that had broken and healed her. One evening, as she closed the store, Emily stood outside and watched the sun dip below the trees. The air was warm, the sky painted gold. Daisy was older now, slower, but still wagged her tail beside her. Ryan came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her, and whispered, "You found your light again." She smiled softly and said, "No, I just remembered where to look." And in that moment, under the soft hum of the fading day, surrounded by everything she'd rebuilt, Emily finally understood that happiness was never about having a perfect life. It was about loving the imperfect one she had. The pain had once drowned her, but it also taught her how to swim. The girl who once lived in shadows had found her sun again. And this time, she knew no storm could ever take it away.